Welcome to Future Epoch, where we learn more about our world. In the early hours of the 27th of May 2015, Swiss police entered one of Zurich's most exclusive hotels. They moved quietly through the corridors of the Bau or Lac, knocking on doors. The guests they were looking for were not criminals in the conventional sense. They were football executives, men who governed the most popular sport on earth. By breakfast, 7 of them were in handcuffs. The arrests sent shockwaves through global sport. Within hours, the United States Department of Justice unsealed an indictment accusing 14 individuals of racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. The total value of bribes alleged by prosecutors exceeded $150 million. The organization at the center of it all was FIFA, the body that controls world football. FIFA was founded in 1904. Today it has 211 member associations, more than the United Nations itself. It governs the rules of the game, oversees player registrations and international transfers, and most critically, it organizes and sells the FIFA World Cup, the single most watched sporting event in human history. The 2020 World Cup final alone drew an estimated television audience of over 1.5 billion people. That kind of audience generates extraordinary commercial value. Television rights, sponsorship deals, and licensing agreements for a single tournament are worth billions of dollars. For anyone who controlled the decisions about where and how those tournaments were awarded, the financial temptation was almost without precedent in the history of sport. FIFA's problems did not begin in 2015. They had been building for decades. The organization's modern structure was shaped largely by João Havelange, who served as FIFA president from 1974 to 1998. Under Havelange, FIFA expanded aggressively, bringing in new member associations from Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean, while securing major commercial sponsorship deals that transformed the organization into a global business. But investigators and journalists would later document that this expansion came alongside a culture of payments and benefits directed toward officials who supported Havelange's political agenda within the sport. When Sepp Blatter succeeded him in 1998, that culture continued. Blatter built his political support through FIFA's development programs, which funneled money to national football associations around the world. These programs were legitimate in principle, but became, in practice, instruments of political patronage, creating a network of loyalty that kept Blatter in power through 5 consecutive presidential elections. One of the most significant figures in the unfolding scandal was Jack Warner, a Trinidadian official who served as FIFA vice president and as president of CONCACAF, the confederation governing football across North and Central America and the Caribbean. Warner would later be indicted by the Department of Justice on charges including wire fraud and money laundering. Prosecutors alleged he received millions of dollars in bribes in exchange for supporting particular World Cup bids and commercial contracts. The mechanism was, in most cases, recognizably similar. Media rights companies paid bribes to FIFA and confederation officials to secure broadcasting contracts for major tournaments. Hosting rights were awarded through block votes, and those votes, investigators alleged, were routinely bought. The money moved through shell companies, wire transfers, and cash payments across multiple continents over more than 2 decades. The conflict that ultimately broke the scandal into public view centered on 2 World Cup hosting decisions, Russia for 2018 and Qatar for 2022. The 2010 vote to award both tournaments was contentious from the outset. The United States, which had staged a broadly successful World Cup in 1994, was bidding again for 2022 and was widely regarded as the frontrunner. When Qatar, a nation with no significant football infrastructure, summer temperatures routinely exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, and a population of under 3 million, won the vote with a final score of 14-8 over the American bid, the reaction across the football world was one of disbelief and, in many quarters, immediate suspicion. Investigations by FIFA's own ethics committee, led by American lawyer Michael Garcia, examined the bidding process in detail. Garcia's report, completed in 2004, ran to over 400 pages. When FIFA published only a short summary rather than the full document, Garcia publicly accused the organization of misrepresenting his findings and resigned in protest. The complete report was not made public until 2017, and even then significant portions were redacted from the released version. The American investigation had been running quietly for several years before the Zurich arrests. The FBI and the Department of Justice's Criminal Division built their case methodically, working with cooperating witnesses and detailed financial records accumulated over a long period. The indictments named 9 FIFA officials and 5 corporate executives, among them high-ranking Confederation figures from both CONCACAF and CONMEBOL, the South American Football Confederation. The charges were sweeping in their scope. Prosecutors described a pattern of corruption spanning more than 24 years, involving multiple generations of football officials and their commercial partners. Bribe payments were alleged in connection with broadcasting rights for the Copa America and the Gold Cup, with World Cup qualification media deals, and with commercial marketing contracts across the Americas and beyond. 4 days after the Zurich arrests, on the 2nd of June 2015, Sepp Blatter announced his resignation as FIFA president. He had been re-elected to the position just days earlier, but the scale of the indictments and the withdrawal of support from major corporate sponsors had made his position impossible to sustain. Blatter himself was not among those initially charged by the Americans, but Swiss federal authorities separately opened a criminal investigation into his conduct, focusing in part on a 2 million Swiss franc payment made to UEFA president Michel Platini in 2011. In December 2015, FIFA's Ethics Committee suspended Blatter for 8 years, a ban later reduced to 6. Platini, who had been widely expected to succeed Blatter, was also suspended, and his candidacy for the FIFA presidency effectively ended. The 2016 election was eventually won by Gianni Infantino, a relatively little-known Swiss-Italian official who had served as UEFA's general secretary, running on a platform of reform and greater financial transparency. The legal consequences accumulated steadily over the years that followed. More than 40 individuals and entities were ultimately charged in connection with the American investigation, and dozens entered guilty pleas. Several officials were extradited to the United States from countries where they had been detained. The payments at the center of the prosecutions spanned television rights for tournaments across Latin America, sponsorship arrangements, and hosting vote-related bribes stretching back into the 1990s. Qatar's position as host of the 2022 World Cup survived the scandal. Russia hosted the 2008 tournament as planned. A separate and significant international controversy developed around Qatar's treatment of the migrant workers who built its stadiums, with human rights organizations documenting unsafe working conditions and thousands of worker deaths in the years leading up to the tournament. The FIFA scandal is not simply a story about corrupt individuals who happen to find themselves in positions of power. It is a story about institutional design, about what happens when an organization controls billions of dollars in commercial rights while remaining structurally insulated from the kind of external oversight that would be applied to a corporation or a government body. FIFA was structured in a way that concentrated enormous financial decision-making power in the hands of a small number of officials while providing little meaningful accountability. Smaller member associations in the developing world were financially dependent on FIFA and its confederations for development funds, and that dependency created leverage. Leverage was converted into votes, and votes were converted into tournament hosting rights and broadcasting contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The organization's internal ethics mechanisms were slow to respond, easily compromised, and ultimately inadequate to the scale of what had been happening. It required a foreign government, the United States Department of Justice, to bring the most serious accountability that FIFA's leadership had ever faced. That fact alone raises a question that extends well beyond football: who governs the governors of international institutions? The question the FIFA scandal leaves behind is not whether corruption existed. The evidence, the guilty pleas, and the court judgments answered that definitively. The deeper question is whether the changes that followed were structural or cosmetic. Infantino's FIFA introduced new financial transparency measures, governance reforms, and updated ethics procedures. But the organization's fundamental model, a body that controls billions in commercial rights, while being governed through block voting among 211 member associations with vastly different interests, vastly different institutional capacities, and vastly different relationships with accountability, remains largely intact. The World Cup was held in Qatar. It will be held in the United States, Canada, and Mexico in 2026. The tournament continues to grow, the rights fees continue to rise, and the money flowing through football continues to increase. The sport itself remains loved by billions of people who had no part in what took place inside those hotel rooms in Zurich. Whether the institutions that govern it have genuinely changed, or whether the structural incentives that created the scandal are simply waiting for the next generation of officials willing to exploit them, is a question the sport has not yet answered. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel.